After gunning down a couple of drones the Borg contain, and then... This is the best plan I've ever had! Ow!
Yes, sir, this is definitely the best plan I've ever... Every day it's a getting closer, going faster than a roller coaster.
Quick side note, in this breakdown I will be analyzing obvious inconsistencies with the Queen and her interactions with the Borg Collective. However, right now I won't be going too deeply into that discussion. Due to these drastic changes, we have to assume that there has been some shift within the Collective itself, or nothing's going to make sense. So for the moment, we're going to assume that this isn't any kind of continuity issue or bad writing, but something massive that has changed within the Borg. We'll get down to the writing and continuity issues at a different time. Getting to the episode proper, when analyzing the Borg Collective in the Voyager episode Unimatrix Zero, it's very engaging and eye-opening to see this aspect of the Borg. And if I'm going to be honest, it's something that I never considered, but I think makes a lot of sense once watching the episode again. Namely, that mutations could occur within the Collective and impact the drones specifically. When you think of the Borg, they are indeed their own type of culture that ultimately becomes some type of organism. However, all of these species that are brought together would be augmented and likely genetically changed. If bringing both perfection and order to the galaxy is important to the Borg, then changing any deficiencies in a species would make sense. It also explains why the skin of every species assimilated ultimately turns white to one range or another. With these changes, it would be logical then that some unforeseen mutation would occur. One of these mutations would be the creation of Unimatrix Zero, a construct that allows individuality for Borg drones when they are in their regeneration cycle. Though, here's a fun fact, this episode aired nearly a year after the Matrix movie launched and was a massive success. We can't be sure how long the Unimatrix Zero construct existed, however dialogue indicates that it was probably around for at least a few decades. This is derived from multiple sources, but the main one being that Seven of Nine was a part of it for a lot of her life. And we have reason to believe that the construct existed before she even joined it. After all this time, though, for one reason or another, the Collective ultimately became aware of the existence of Unimatrix Zero. As we all know, the Borg absolutely do not investigate, research, or use the scientific method to fix problems. They only assimilate. So of course, it's no surprise when we see them in this episode start investigating, researching, and utilizing the scientific method in an attempt to figure out how to stop people from joining Unimatrix Zero. As I've already discussed, the interactions we see with the Borg seem to delineate heavily between the Queen herself and the Borg Collective. In almost every interaction, she uses words such as I and you. Now, I'll grant she utilizes we sometimes, but that only makes it confusing as she doesn't use it a lot and it seems really hit or miss. And she is very big on seeming like an individual when interacting with other Borg. As an example, in the first scene we see her, the Queen is discussing the quote-unquote sickness that has impacted one of the Borg drones, allowing him to have individuality in Unimatrix Zero. The Borg drone doesn't respond to her specifically, so the Queen removes him from the Collective. Note, she states that she has disconnected him from the Collective. Now, some might say that she's just being the avatar of the Collective, but still, it's odd. She states, "You're alone. I know how uncomfortable that can be." This all seems specific to an individual. She then gives orders to other drones. Think about that as well. Again, many will state that the Queen is some avatar, and yet she has to tell these drones what to do? It's just curious that this entire interaction occurs. After this scene, we see the Borg definitely not continuing to do research to try to find those who can access Unimatrix Zero. The mutation itself is something that's really interesting that was added. I do like it as a storytelling instrument. Occurring only in 1 in every 1 million drones, it is apparently also extremely difficult for the Collective to determine what drone is infected. We are never given why this is, but it does make some sense. First, the mutation is stated to be recessive, which can be harder to find. And two, given the vast territories of the Collective and how many drones that exist, it may be hard to diagnose each individually. Additionally, the drones have no idea they have this ability when they awaken, and so the collective is not made aware with their thoughts. I do have one question though. While it is consistently stated that the Borg drones within Unimatrix 01 have no way of impacting the outside world, they are somehow able to contact 7 of 9. This is of course explained due to her Borg implants. However, if they can contact 7, why not drones who wake up after being in Unimatrix 0 who are still a part of the collective? You'd have to be careful. True, you wouldn't want the collective to know about you, but would it be possible to somehow fashion a virus or something and send it to a drone that is awake within the collective? That way you can hide yourself and not put Voyager in danger. Presumably, they all have similar implants to that of 7. Now, in theory, this might have been discussed and dismissed as any attempt to contact a connected Borg might have been too great a risk, but it would have been nice to at least see them discuss it in the episode. Looking at Unimatrix 0, we'll get into its breakdown after this. When analyzing what drones have the mutation, we see Klingons, Hirogen, and even officers who state they were assimilated at the Battle of Wolf 359. Which, how, honestly? The only explanation that I can think of is that one of the ships survived the Battle of Wolf 359. Though this is tenuous, we do know that one ship did survive that battle, but we don't know anything about the ship itself. It's possible that it wasn't destroyed, it was assimilated and then sent back to the Delta Quadrant. Why the Borg would do this and not assimilate all of the ships, I don't know, but it's the best explanation we got. Also, just as an aside, for those who want to try to point it out, there's no evidence that the Klingons ever joined the Battle of Wolf 359. And in fact, the official Star Trek website states that they didn't. We have no more reason to believe that the Klingons were there than we do that the Breen decided to get into the party. We know that the Klingons and the Romulans were possibly invited to fight the Borg, but none of them made it in time. That aside, back to Inconsistency Central, the collective continues to investigate the mutation. We get even more odd dialogue from the Queen. While talking to a dead Borg, she states, "It's a shame you aren't alive for the disembodiment. It's the epitome of perfection." So, do the Borg not feel what she feels? Are they not all one hive mind? Or is this just her own personal pleasure? If the collective isn't aware of what disembodiment is like, if they aren't connected to the Queen in that way, why? Additionally, while trying to figure out how to stop the signal that keeps Unimatrix 0 running, she says, "You are making this very difficult," and she seems frustrated, while the rest of the Borg seem like zombies. As I've alluded to, ultimately the free drones within Unimatrix 0 reach out to 7 of 9 to convince her and the crew to help them keep Unimatrix 0 hidden. Those on Voyager ultimately agree to help, and it is discussed how to introduce nanites into the Borg collective to hide the drones. When it is questioned how they would get this to the entire collective, 7 of 9 notes that the central plexus within the Borg cube is connected to the entire collective. Now let's pause right here. Many have claimed that Hugh in iBorg only impacted one cube. I even talked about how that may have been a possibility. However, this directly contradicts that argument. If every Borg cube or vessel has a central plexus, then this would mean that everything is shared. This is also an amazing weakness for the Borg. Any species that realizes a nexus exists could, in theory, upload a virus through that means and defeat the Borg. Just something to think about. The last piece of this video I want to discuss is how the collective contacts Voyager. Through Transwarp Tech, the collective accesses the computer core of Voyager and discusses the situation with Janeway through comms. The Queen offers to get them home early if Janeway stays out of this quote-unquote civil war. So let me get this straight. The Borg have the ability to utilize Transwarp to access the computer core of Voyager and to talk to Janeway, but can't disable the ship to assimilate it. Let's assume that they can only talk to them, can't do anything else. Why the hell wouldn't the collective just access the comm and play Klingon opera at ear-destroying levels? This ability is severely underused by the collective and shows how Voyager defeats them so easily. And while I was tempted to take swipes at the Borg for negotiating, this is actually not outside of the bounds of what we see with them doing. Even in TNG, there was discussion that the Borg may be open to negotiation. We just have never seen it because of how inferior Starfleet was. Stay tuned as we continue down this rabbit hole and I give you my thoughts on how I would have fixed this entire mess.